All right, and welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your brief preview of The Forgotten Sands, but again, I told you it was just a preview. But now, in order to sort of gain your interest, I'm going to put an entire book out there for you. It was a book I finished several months ago I called it Infected. I completed the book, and I was convinced I would publish it, but by the time I reached the end, I liked it enough to keep the draft. I stowed it away in my closet. I simply wasn't convinced it was good enough to be bought by a publisher at this present time. So rather than just let it collect dust, I decided to post it online for your enjoyment, and I hope you enjoy it while I continue work on The Forgotten Sands. So enjoy Infected. This is the prologue. The nightmare began with a phone call in the middle of the night. Dr. Tomoya Nagawa wearily rubbed his eyes and picked up the phone. What he heard next instantly awoke him. Please hold for the director of security. Dr. Nagawa was one of the world's top biologists, and his work regularly received the highest accolades. He was used to rubbing shoulders with the wealthy and elite in society, but he had never worked with the Japanese government, or any government for that matter. Hello, Dr. Nagawa. Apologies for our waking you, but this simply could not wait. Everything is fine. Tell me, how can I be of service? Of course. I'll get straight to the point, Doctor. I need you to get ready as quickly as possible. A car is awaiting you outside your home. From there, you will be taken to a boat. I need you to investigate a disturbance in the area. If this is about Fukushima, let me assure you everything is fine, he mumbled. No, Dr. Nagawa. This has nothing to do with Fukushima. This is a matter of international security. That got his attention. Mr. Director, I'm afraid that I can't be of much service to you unless you tell me more. There was a pause on the other side. There isn't much I can tell you, Doctor. We have a fleet of research vessels out in the ocean, about 30 miles from the coast of Japan. Our scientists were working on a top-secret government research project. 18 hours ago, all communication with them has ceased. We need you to go and investigate the results of their experiments. Forgive me, isn't this a military matter? Indeed, and that is why you will be accompanied with several members of our military. But we strongly suspect that this was no attack. The experiments were of a highly volatile nature, Doctor, and it requires your immediate attention. Now, time is of the essence. We need you on that boat immediately. And with that, the director clicked. Dr. Nagawa quickly dressed and indeed found a car just as the director promised. Deep within him was a sense of foreboding that grew. He was deeply concerned that all communication had simply ceased, and that the Japanese government thought it dangerous enough to warrant sending members of the military with him. But what concerned him most of all was that he was being sent to investigate the results of the, quote, highly volatile experiments. This was all political code, and he knew exactly what it meant. The scientists were working on something extremely dangerous. Less than 30 minutes later, he was dropped off at the nearest port. Most of it was dark and closed down, but there was someone waiting for him. A captain in the Japanese armed forces. Dr. Nagawa, follow me please, came the voice of a man who was used to barking orders, and he obeyed. Just as the director had promised, there was a small vessel awaiting them, a military patrol boat. Without a word, the captain led the doctor aboard and ordered the vessel to move immediately. At his command, the patrol boat sped off. Dr. Nagawa found himself a place to sit down and then noticed everyone was traveling armed, which only added to his anxiety. What could be awaiting them that was dangerous enough to warrant an armed escort? He looked over at the captain, who sat motionlessly, seeming to be calm. He wondered what the captain was thinking. Captain Lee was given as much notice as Dr. Nagawa. His superiors had called him 2 hours ago and ordered him to escort a biologist. Their mission was simple. Get on the boats and find any intel they could regarding the communication blackout. And he obeyed. He was also told to take several of his best men with him. And he was from there only told to be prepared to engage hostiles. But he could get no more information than that. This wasn't unusual for Captain Lee. He had been used to doing such missions. Even if he didn't understand all the facts, he had his orders, and he didn't question them. But deep within him was a suspicion. He couldn't explain it. Call it a warrior's instinct honed by years on the battlefield. Something was very unusual about this particular mission, and he didn't like it. Though he silently called himself a fool, he couldn't escape the nagging thought that they were walking straight into a trap. Dr. Nagawa was on the verge of falling asleep when he heard one of Captain Lee's men call out. Captain Lee ordered the spotlight to be activated, and he stood on the railing and gazed out. The spotlight pierced the darkness and revealed a solitary vessel. It was fairly large. No lights emanated from it. It simply floated on the waters as if it had been abandoned. Captain Lee couldn't detect any sign of intrusion, but that made him all the more aware. He ordered his men to immediately prepare to board. You two, Doctor, you stay behind us. We will sweep the area with you, and then you can begin your work. Dr. Nagawa nodded vigorously. This wasn't a question. It was an order. A bridge was prepared, and Captain Lee stepped onto the boat, assault rifle trained ahead. He and his men all had searchlights attached to their rifles, and they all spread out carefully, searching the deck. Dr. Nagawa timidly followed behind. He was no military expert and felt out of place in all this. Still, there didn't appear to be any sign of intrusion. After a thorough search, Captain Lee appeared satisfied. Deck secure, he called out. We now sweep the lower deck. His men all nodded and walked cautiously down the stairs. Captain, one of them called out. The door is locked. Captain Lee's eyebrows furrowed. Locked or jammed, he inquired. Locked from the inside, sir. This was a strange development. Break it down, he ordered. Keep your weapons ready. Safety's off. The door was broken down, and their searchlights went all over the place, searching for intruders. But they found nothing. When Captain Lee was satisfied the area was clear, he ordered the lights turned on. Come, Dr. Nagawa. The ship appears to be secure, he called out. Dr. Nagawa stepped down into the darkness, and after a brief moment, the lights were turned on. There was a momentary shock as his eyes adjusted to the harsh light, and when he could see, he cried out, Captain! But Captain Lee had already seen it. What on earth? He murmured. They were standing in a state-of-the-art laboratory, and it was covered in bloodstains. On the walls, the equipment, even the floor. What concerned the captain most of all was the blood was fresh. His men already had their assault rifles out and trained in all directions, ready to strike. But there were no hostiles. Captain, you'd better come see this. He ran over, and his own blood drained at what he saw. The body of a scientist lay lifeless on the floor. They turned him over, and he too was covered in bloodstains. A look of fear frozen on his face. But there were no wounds, no outer signs of an attack. Divide in times of 2, he barked. I want every square inch of this vessel covered over, now, he ordered. Dr. Nagawa came over and blanked at the sight. Is that... It appears so, Doctor. My team is searching for clues as we speak. Now, let's do what we came here for. Dr. Nagawa remembered his own mission. The mission, yes, of course. He felt sick as he looked over the destruction everywhere. Broken shards of glass crunched, paper strewn everywhere, the horrible bloodstains. He then very suddenly wanted to leave, but the captain was right. They had a mission to accomplish. He stepped gingerly over the wreckage and made it to the computer. He tapped the keyboard and it instantly came to life. It displayed a series of lab notes. He reached into his shirt pocket and removed his spectacles. Well now, let's see what you are working on, he murmured. Meanwhile, Captain Lee had stayed behind to guard the biologist. All his senses were on high alert, every muscle in his body tensed. This had all the signs of an assault, but no direct evidence of an attack. The door was locked from the inside. The bodies had no bullets or knives, but dead they lay just the same. Clearly, some sort of a fight had broken out, but everything valuable had been left behind. Captain Lee did not understand this. Despite his years in the military, this situation presented an enigma, like nothing he had ever seen before. As he stood waiting for the doctor to find whatever he could, he did wonder. He sat glancing at all the biohazard signs practically everywhere. He saw the formula that hadn't been destroyed. He was beginning to wonder, what were the scientists working on? How much did his government know, and what weren't they telling him? Dr. Nagawa scanned through the reports. It was mostly made up of lengthy equations that he didn't understand, but the research archived in the computer went back for years, and it seemed every experiment had been a failure. Strange, he wondered. He pulled up some of the more recent experiments and attempted to decipher the equations. As he leaned in, he found he did understand some of it, and he scrolled down. He saw a computer graphic displaying a 3D image of a double helix. As he watched it, he saw cells coming in and attaching themselves to it. What on earth? He sat transfixed, watching the cells merge with the DNA, and then it began to mutate into something different. The cells grew larger while it began modifying core elements of the structure. He scrolled further down. Test successful. Project Zeta ready for deployment, he read. He continued watching the graph and shook his head. No, that's impossible unless... He began to think very hard. Unless... A thought had occurred. There was only one way that was possible. He immediately dismissed the thought and refused to believe it. No, not possible at all. But he glanced at the destruction, the blood, the dead scientists. He turned back around and immediately began running calculations. He reviewed the equations, checking over the math. His eyes widened, and a horror grew within him. When he checked over the last equation, he found everything checked out. No, he shouted. He was then overcome by panic. Captain Lee, he yelled. Instantly, the captain whirled around with his gun, but Dr. Nagawa tripped over his chair, attempting to reach him. Captain, we need to go right now. His breath was short, and his heart was racing. What is it, Doctor? What did you find? I found out what the scientists were working on, what this whole vessel is dedicated to, and why it's out in the middle of the ocean. Why? What happened here? Dr. Nagawa was reaching a fever pitch. We don't have time, Captain. If we don't leave right now, we're all going to end up like that scientist, and he pointed to the body. Dead? No, Captain. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He's not dead. Not yet. Captain Lee called on his men again. Doctor, I'm not sure I follow you. Dr. Nagawa was exasperated. Captain, this vessel was dedicated to the research and development of biological weapons, and their very last entry says the tests were successful. Now, do you understand? Captain Lee's eyes widened, and he yelled again for his team. He understood all too well what had happened here. A few moments passed, though. No sign of his men. Then he heard a scream pierce the silence. Immediately, he reacted. Stay here, Doctor, he ordered as he ran into the direction of the scream. No, Captain, wait! But it was too late. The captain ran with his finger on the trigger. He was beginning to understand what was frightening Dr. Nagawa. But he couldn't leave a man behind. It just wasn't his nature. He turned the corner and raised his rifle. No, he yelled. On the ground, all his team lay lifeless, covered in the bloodstains, with a look of horror all over their faces. He heard movement. He kept his gun trained in front of him. Whatever was in here would pay for this. And then he saw it. Out of the shadows walked a figure in a blood-stained lab coat. Stop where you are, yelled Captain Lee. And then he saw it. It had the form of a person, but its skin was a sickly green hue, and blood covered its mouth, and its eyes were a dead pasty white. He didn't hesitate. He immediately began to fire, but it didn't affect the creature. It ambled towards him with arms reaching out. No! And Dr. Nagawa and Captain Lee knew no more. Dr. Nagawa was in a state of panic. He knew what was going on here, and it terrified him. He waited for Captain Lee to return. He heard the gunshots, the captain yelling no, the scream, and then the silence. Captain Lee, he called out. Nothing. Captain Lee, he yelled louder. Still nothing. A sense of terror, like claustrophobia, set in. Captain Lee was no more. He knew that. I have to get out of here, he thought. He began looking for the exit. As he did, he noticed something. The dead scientist was missing. He had been lying on the ground only a few feet away from the computer. Now he was gone. Dr. Nagawa began nervously backing away, quickly scanning everywhere. It could be anywhere at all. And then he bumped into something. Captain Lee, he called faintly. He turned around and yelled. The dead scientist was indeed, as he said, not dead, but very much alive. But it was something else. Everything about him was different. The sickly green skin and those haunting white eyes. The creature lunged for Dr. Nagawa, who tried to escape. It grabbed his arm with surprising force, and then, bizarrely enough, it sank its teeth into him. Dr. Nagawa yelled in pain, but survival instincts kicked in, and he wrested free of the creature. He ran up the stairs, the creature in pursuit. He slammed the door just as it was coming up. Dr. Nagawa halted the lock in place as the creature pounded the door. His arm throbbed painfully. He examined it, and it was red and irritated, but otherwise fine. He grabbed it and ran to the boat. He glanced at the GPS, unsure of where to go. He then hit previous destination. The boat then automatically began speeding back to the harbor. He sank onto the ground, his arm throbbing more painfully by the minute. He didn't know how much time he had, but he had to warn his government. The vessel needed to be destroyed immediately, before it could cause untold damage. He then felt a deep weariness. He lay on the deck, unable to stay awake. His arm throbbed even more painfully, and Dr. Tomoya Nagawa never awoke again. And that was the prologue to Infected. I hope you guys enjoyed it.